The alarm screamed through the bridge of the Harmony's edge, and Captain Minu jerked awake in his chair. His coffee went flying, splattering across the floor as the ship shuddered violently. Red lights flashed across every screen. "Report," Minu barked, gripping the armrests as another tremor shook the vessel. Young Park spun around from the helm station, his face pale. "Captain, we've got a massive debris field ahead. Something big just exploded out there." Minu was already moving, his boots pounding against the metal floor as he rushed to the main viewport. Through the blackness of space, he could see chunks of metal spinning wildly, trailing fire and atmosphere. His stomach tightened. That wasn't just debris. That was a ship and recently destroyed. "Scan for survivors," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. Doctor's voice crackled over the intercom from the medical bay. "Captain, if there are survivors out there, they won't last long. That's extreme radiation from a core breach." Minu's jaw clenched. They were on a research mission, studying dead planets in the fringe colonies. They weren't equipped for rescue operations, especially not in a radiation zone, but the thought of leaving people to die in the cold darkness made his chest hurt. "Keep scanning," he said firmly. His fingers flew across his console. Suddenly, his eyes widened. "Captain, I'm picking up life signs. Faint, but they're there, but sir." He hesitated, looking back at Minu with worry in his eyes. "The ship's registry. It's—" The bridge went silent. Everyone knew about the collective. They were a massive alien empire that controlled dozens of star systems. They were powerful, arrogant, and they looked at humans like insects. Earth Command had standing orders to avoid contact whenever possible. Too many incidents, too much tension. Minu stared at the wreckage floating in the void. Didn't like humans. They'd made that clear at every diplomatic meeting, every trade negotiation. They saw humanity as newcomers, children playing with technology they didn't understand. But people were dying out there. "Set a course for the life signs," Minu said quietly. "Maximum speed." "Captain, the orders started." "I heard the orders," Minu interrupted, his voice hard. "Now I'm giving you new ones. We don't leave people to die, not even move." The Harmony's edge cut through space, its engines burning hot as it approached the destroyed vessel. Through the viewport, Minu could see the ship more clearly now. It had been elegant once, all smooth curves and silver metal. Now it was torn apart, bleeding fire into space. "I'm reading 4 life signs," reported. "All weak. They're in what's left of the command section." "Prep the medical bay," Minu spoke into his communicator. "We're bringing in. Do we have any data on their biology?" There was a pause. "Some. Enough to keep them alive, maybe. But Captain, their blood is toxic to humans if I make one wrong move." "You won't," Minu said with confidence he didn't quite feel. "Get ready." The rescue took 3 hours. 3 hours of careful maneuvering, of cutting through twisted metal, of pulling unconscious alien bodies through the airlock. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, with blue skin and too many joints in their arms. They wore elaborate uniforms that were now torn and burned. The last one they pulled out was clearly their leader. His uniform had more markings, and even unconscious, he carried himself with authority. Minu checked the identification chip they'd scanned. High Commander. Important then. Very important. In the medical bay, worked like a woman possessed. Her hands were steady as she attached strange equipment to alien bodies, monitoring vital signs that made no sense to human eyes. The air smelled sharp and chemical. "Will they live?" Minu asked quietly, standing in the doorway. "Maybe," said without looking up. "Their respiratory system is shutting down. I'm flooding the bay with a nitrogen-rich mixture, but I'm guessing. We've never treated before." Days passed. The Harmony's edge continued its journey, but now with 4 alien patients in critical condition. Barely slept. She studied every piece of medical data she could find, most of it incomplete or heavily censored by the collective. Minu watched her push herself to exhaustion. On the 5th day, one of them died. His body simply gave up, too damaged by the explosion and radiation. Stood over the body, her shoulders shaking with silent tears. Minyu wanted to comfort her, but what could he say? They'd tried. On the seventh day, woke up. His eyes snapped open, pure black with no visible iris, and he tried to sit up immediately. Gently pushed him back down, speaking slowly. Easy. You're safe. Your ship was destroyed. You're on a human vessel. His head turned, taking in the medical bay, the equipment, the three sleeping forms of his crew. When he spoke, his voice was rough and deep. Humans, you rescued us. Yes, Minyu said, stepping forward. I'm Captain Minyu. Welcome aboard the Harmony's Edge. Something flickered across alien face. Confusion, disbelief, it was hard to read. Why? Your kind has no obligation to mine. We are not allies. Minyu met those black eyes steadily. Because you were dying, that's reason enough. Over the next 3 weeks, the slowly recovered. All except the one they'd lost. Watched everything with quiet intensity. He watched work herself sick trying to save his crew. He watched bring them food prepared specially for their metabolism. He watched Minyu divert the ship's course to get them to an outpost faster. One evening, Minyu found standing at a viewport, staring at the stars. The alien commander was tall and imposing, but there was something different in his posture now. Less arrogance, maybe. Your people are strange, said without turning around. The collective teaches that humans are weak, soft, too emotional to survive the galaxy. And what do you think now? Minyu asked. Was quiet for a long moment. I think you are strong in ways we do not understand. You saved us knowing we might not return the favor. That takes strength. When they finally reached the outpost, the parting was brief, and his crew were taken immediately by medical teams. But before he left, pressed something into Minyu's hand. It was a small crystal, perfectly clear, that seemed to glow with inner light. A mercy token, explained. In culture, it represents a life debt. I do not know if we will meet again, Captain, but know this, you showed mercy when you had no reason to. That is not something my people will forget. Minyu closed his fingers around the crystal. It felt warm against his palm. I hope our peoples can build on this, friendship instead of suspicion. His expression was unreadable. Perhaps, the galaxy is strange and the future uncertain. As the Harmony's Edge pulled away from the outpost, Minyu stood on the bridge, holding the crystal token. Looked over, curiosity on his young face. Do you think this changes anything, Captain, between us and the... Minyu didn't answer right away. He watched the station grow smaller in the distance, becoming just another light among millions. I don't know, he finally said, but I'd rather save a life and risk disappointment than let someone die and live with certainty. The crystal token found a place on his desk, where it caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. Minyu didn't know then that this small act of kindness would echo across the years, that this moment would be remembered when worlds burned and empires fell. He didn't know that mercy, once given, could never be truly forgotten. He only knew that he'd done what felt right. Sometimes that had to be enough. 5 years had passed since the rescue, and the galaxy had changed. The collective had grown more aggressive, swallowing up smaller civilizations and expanding their borders. Humanity watched nervously from their colonies, knowing they might be next. Ambassador Nam straightened her formal jacket as the shuttle descended toward the... Through the window, she could see a planet of silver cities and crimson oceans, beautiful and intimidating at the same time. First time meeting the... asked from across the shuttle. He was head of security for this mission, a hard man with scars on his face and suspicion in his eyes. First time, admitted. But we need this treaty. If we can show them we're serious about peace, maybe we can avoid war. Grunted, don't trust them. I've read the reports. They don't see us as equals. In the back of the shuttle, Lee clutched a data case to her chest. Inside were codes for advanced agricultural technology, farming methods that could feed billions. It was humanity's gift, proof they came in good faith. Was young, barely 25, and she looked terrified. Commander Park noticed her fear and sat down beside her. He was older now than when he'd served under Captain Minu, more experienced in carrying the weight of command. "It'll be okay," he said gently. "We're here to build bridges, not walls." "But what if they don't want bridges?" whispered. Didn't have an answer for that. The palace was enormous, carved from a single piece of white stone that seemed to glow in the alien sun. Guards lined the halls, tall and imposing in their armor. They looked at the human delegation with barely concealed contempt. Emperor Al sat on a throne of twisted metal, his black eyes watching as the humans approached. He was old his skin darker than most, and power radiated from him like heat. Standing beside the throne was High Commander. His heart jumped. She'd read about him, about the rescue 5 years ago. She'd hoped he might be an ally here, but his face was blank, unreadable. "Humans," the Emperor's voice boomed through the chamber. "You request an audience, speak." Stepped forward, keeping her voice steady. "Your Majesty, we come seeking peace. Our peoples have much to offer each other. We bring technology and goodwill." "Technology?" The Emperor's laugh was harsh. "You bring us nothing we do not already possess, but very well, let us see this gift of yours." Stepped forward with shaking hands, offering the data case. A official took it, scanning the contents. His eyes widened slightly. "Agricultural codes, advanced hydroponics, genetic optimization. This is impressive." A gesture of friendship said, "This technology could feed billions. We offer it freely as proof of our intentions." The Emperor leaned back, something cruel playing across his features. "Freely? How very human. Tell me, Ambassador, do you know why we call your species the soft ones?" Felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her face calm. "No, Your Majesty. Because you are weak. You feel too much, think too much about others. 5 years ago, one of your captains saved here from certain death." The Emperor gestured lazily at his commander. "Do you know what we thought when we heard? We thought, here is a species that cannot make hard choices, a species that will sacrifice themselves for strangers." Remained silent, his face like stone. "That rescue," the Emperor continued, "was not strength, it was weakness, and weakness has no place in this galaxy." "I disagree," said, her voice firm despite her fear. "Compassion is strength, the ability to help others, to build instead of destroy." "Enough," the Emperor waved his hand dismissively. "You bore me with your philosophy. Very well, we shall have your treaty. Let us proceed with the ceremony." The ceremony was elaborate, full of rituals that didn't understand. But as they moved through the palace to the signing chamber, she felt something was wrong. Felt it too. His hand kept drifting toward his weapon, his eyes scanning every corner. "Something's off," he whispered too. "I know," replied quietly. "Stay alert." The signing chamber was circular, with a high ceiling. The human delegation stood on one side, the on the other. In the center was a table with the treaty documents, approached with the Emperor, ready to make history. That's when the doors slammed shut. Soldiers poured from hidden panels in the walls, weapons raised. The human delegation spun around, but they were surrounded. Reached for his gun, but a blade was already at his throat. "What is this?" demanded, fury and betrayal flooding through her. "We came in peace." The Emperor smiled, a terrible expression on his alien face. "Yes, you did, and we thank you for that, especially for this." He held up the data case. "Your agricultural codes will be very useful when we colonize your worlds." "What?" gasped. "Did you think we wanted peace?" The Emperor laughed. "No, small human. We wanted to see how weak you truly were, and you exceeded our expectations. You walked into our home, gave us your secrets, and trusted us to honor a treaty." He shook his head in mock sadness. "The galaxy is too harsh for species like yours." Stepped forward, his voice hard. "You're making a mistake. Attack us and—" "And what?" The Emperor's eyes glittered. "You'll show us mercy again, please do. We're counting on it." An officer approached the Emperor, whispering urgently. The Emperor nodded, then addressed the humans again. While you've been here, playing at diplomacy, our fleets have been moving. At this moment, they are attacking 12 of your colonies. Your people are dying as we speak, and there is nothing you can do. Felt the world tilt. 12 colonies, millions of people. No, she whispered. You can't. We already have. The Emperor turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. He gestured, and a guard brought forward a crystal on a velvet cushion. Recognized it, a mercy token, the one given to Captain Minu years ago. We found this in our archives. Explain to our guests what it means. Finally moved, his expression pained. It is a symbol of life debt, given when mercy is shown. And what do we think of mercy? The Emperor prompted. His voice was barely a whisper. It is weakness. Exactly. The Emperor picked up the crystal and crushed it between his fingers. The fragments fell like glittering snow. Let this be a lesson to your entire species. Mercy is not strength. Mercy is the luxury of the powerful, and you are not powerful. You are prey. As the guards dragged the human delegation away, locked eyes with, the commander looked away, shame or perhaps fear crossing his features. But he said nothing. He did nothing. They were thrown into a cell deep beneath the palace. The walls were smooth and cold, the only light coming from a dim panel above. Immediately began checking for weaknesses, but knew it was hopeless. They were prisoners and their people were under attack. We have to warn Earth, sobbed, curled in a corner. They don't know what's coming. They know by now, said grimly. The Emperor wanted them to know. He wants humanity to feel helpless. Leaned against the wall, her mind racing. They'd been so naive, so hopeful. They'd brought gifts and smiles to a species that saw kindness as a target, and now people were dying because of their mistake. Captain was right to save them, she said quietly. We have to believe that. But look where it got us, snarled. We saved their lives and they repay us with invasion. No, shook her head. We did the right thing, they did the wrong thing. Those are not the same. Days passed in the cell. They received food and water, but no information. They didn't know if Earth had survived, if the colonies had fallen, if anyone even knew they were alive. The silence was worse than any torture. One night, or what passed for night in their timeless prison, spoke into the darkness. You know what the worst part is? The Emperor was wrong about us. He thinks mercy makes us weak, but he doesn't understand what happens when you betray human mercy. What do you mean? Asked. His voice was cold, harder than had ever heard it. Humans remember kindness, but we also remember betrayal. Every time someone has pushed us to the edge, we've pushed back. And when we push back, we don't stop until the threat is gone. You think Earth will retaliate? Asked. I know they will, said with certainty. They think they've won. They think they've crushed the soft humans, but they've just made the biggest mistake in their empire's history. They've turned mercy into rage, and human rage, he trailed off, staring at the ceiling. Human rage can burn worlds. In the silence that followed, thought about the crushed mercy token, about the Emperor's mocking laughter, about the millions dying in the colonies, and she realized was right. Humanity had offered peace. They had chosen war. Now they would learn the difference between the two. Above them in the palace, stood alone in his quarters, staring at a hologram of Captain Minu, the human who had saved his life. The human whose kindness he had just repaid with silence and betrayal. His hands trembled as he reached for a communicator, then stopped. What could he say? What could he do? The Emperor's will was absolute. To speak against it meant death. But somewhere deep inside, in a place he didn't want to examine, felt something he'd never experienced before. Shame and fear. Fear of what was coming. 1 year after the betrayal, the collective was celebrating. 12 human colonies now flew flags. 4 million humans were dead or enslaved. Earth's military had been shattered in the initial attacks. The soft ones, it seemed, had learned their place. But something was wrong. Patrol ships were disappearing. Not destroyed, just gone. One moment they were on sensors, the next moment nothing. No debris, no distress signals. Just empty space where a ship used to be. Supply convoys started arriving at outposts with their crews unconscious and their cargo untouched. Security footage showed nothing. The crews remembered nothing. But chalked on the hull of each ship in perfect script was a single word: remember. Communications arrays across space began malfunctioning. When technicians investigated, they found the equipment fine, but coded messages had been piggybacked on their own broadcasts. Messages too sophisticated for the primitive humans to create. Yet who else could it be? The military called them the Ghosts. In a secret facility orbiting Neptune far from prying eyes, Admiral stood before a wall of screens. Each one showed a different target: supply depots, military bases, communication hubs. His face was hard, carved from stone and anger. "Status report," he said quietly. A woman in a black uniform stepped forward. Dr. Shin was thin and pale, looking more like a scholar than a weapons designer, but the things she'd created could crack planets. "The stealth fleet is ready, Admiral. 40 ships, completely invisible to sensors. The new drives leave no heat signature, no gravitational wake. They're ghosts in truth." "And the weapon?" asked. Hesitated. "It's ready, but Admiral, if we use it." "We'll use whatever we need to," cut her off. His voice softened slightly. "My brother showed them mercy. They murdered 4 million people in response. We won't make the same mistake." Across the room, a man in combat armor listened silently. IM had been on one of the colonies when they attacked. He'd watched his wife and daughter die in the bombardment. He'd spent 6 months enslaved in a labor camp before human special forces broke him out. Now he led the Ghost Squadron, humanity's most elite soldiers. "We've decoded another message from the prisoners on the," reported. "Ambassador and Commander are still alive. They've been training other prisoners to resist. They don't realize it, but they're building a resistance force right under their noses." A slight smile crossed his face. "The first in a year. That's very human of them. Good. When we come for them, they'll be ready." "When do we strike?" asked. Turned back to the screens, watching as ships moved through space, confident and unaware. "Soon. But first we need to send a message. They mocked our mercy. It's time they learned about our memory." The strike came without warning. A military base on the edge of their territory simply went dark. When reinforcements arrived, they found every weapon destroyed, every ship disabled, every system offline. But the personnel were unharmed, locked in their barracks with stunners. On the main building, painted in letters 50 feet high, was a message. "You mocked the mercy token. Now face the ghosts. This is a warning." The Emperor laughed when he heard. "Empty threats from broken humans. Increase patrols. Find these ghosts and crush them." But the patrols found nothing. Instead, more bases went dark. More ships vanished. The military, so confident a year ago, started jumping at shadows. Their own sensors became unreliable, filled with phantom signals that led nowhere. They couldn't tell what was real and what was human trickery. On the occupied colonies, the resistance grew. Humans who'd been enslaved started sabotaging equipment, feeding false information, creating chaos. They had expected broken, defeated people. They found guerrillas who smiled while serving food and planted explosives when backs were turned. In his quarters, received reports with growing dread. He tried to warn the Emperor that the humans were more dangerous than they appeared, but the Emperor wouldn't listen. The collective's arrogance was absolute. Late one night's door opened without permission. He spun, reaching for his weapon, and froze. A figure in black armor stood in his room, face hidden behind a reflective visor. Human technology, light years beyond what the thought possible. "Don't move," the figure said. The voice was male, cold, processed through filters. "I'm not here to kill you, yet." His hand hovered near his sidearm. "How did you get past security?" Your security is a joke. The figure tilted its head. We've been walking through your palace for weeks. The only reason you're not all dead is because we choose mercy. Still. What do you want? Information, and to deliver a message. The figure stepped closer. You were there when we saved your life. You remember Captain Minu. Stomach clenched, yes. He's my brother. The figure's voice dropped to something dangerous. I want you to understand what's about to happen. For 1 year, we've been studying you, learning your weaknesses, your fears, your failures. We've been inside your military networks, your communications, your homes. We know everything. If you're so powerful, why wait? Challenged, trying to hide his fear. Why not attack? The figure was silent for a moment. Because we needed to be sure. Humans don't go to war lightly. We needed to know absolutely that there was no other way. We needed to exhaust every option for peace. The figure leaned in close. We have. And now, High Commander, you're going to see what happens when you betray human mercy. Are you going to kill me? No, you're going to live. You're going to watch your empire crumble, and you're going to remember every day that you had a choice. You could have spoken up. You could have honored the life debt. You chose silence. The figure turned to leave, then paused. The Emperor keeps the broken mercy token on display, doesn't he? In the trophy room. Yes, whispered. We're taking it back. Consider it a courtesy, letting you know. The figure touched a control on their armor and simply vanished as if they'd never been there. Stood alone in his room, his hands shaking. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, alarms were screaming through the palace. The trophy room had been breached. Nothing was damaged, nothing was taken except one thing, the fragments of the mercy token, carefully collected from the case where they'd rested for a year. In their place was a holographic projector. When activated, it showed Admiral's face. He looked older than his brother, harder, and his eyes were filled with cold purpose. Emperor Al, the recording began, you took our mercy and crushed it. You displayed the fragments like a trophy. That ends now. We are reclaiming the token. We are reclaiming our people. We are reclaiming our colonies. And we are doing this not because we want war, but because you have left us no choice. The Emperor watched, his face darkening with rage. You think we are weak, continued. You think compassion makes us soft. You're wrong. Humanity's greatest strength is not our weapons or our ships, it's our memory. We remember every kindness. We remember every betrayal. And we never ever forget. The recording changed, showing footage of bases going dark, ships vanishing, systems failing. This is what we've done in 1 year with a fraction of our forces. This is us being merciful, giving you a chance to surrender, to return our people unharmed. But that chance has an expiration. The Emperor's fists clenched. In 7 days we will come for our prisoners. In 7 days we will liberate our colonies. In 7 days you will see what humanity looks like when mercy is no longer an option. You mocked our compassion. Now face our rage. The recording ended. The room was silent. Then the Emperor stood, his voice thundering. Prepare every fleet, double the guards on the prisoners. I want every ship we have ready to destroy these ghosts. But watched the empty hologram projector and thought about a human captain who'd risked everything to save strangers. He thought about mercy tokens and life debts. And he wondered if his empire had just signed its own death warrant. On Neptune, stood with his fleet commanders, looking at the assembled ghost squadron. 40 ships that didn't officially exist, carrying weapons that shouldn't be possible, crewed by soldiers who'd lost everything. We gave them mercy once, said quietly. They threw it back in our faces. We gave them warnings. They ignored them. Now we show them why humanity has survived every threat, every disaster, every enemy we've ever faced. I'm stepped forward, his face grim. What are our rules of engagement, Admiral? Simple, replied. We get our people back, we take our colonies back. We destroy their ability to wage war. But they're civilians, they're non-combatants, we leave them alive. We're not them. We don't target innocents. Even after what they did to us, someone asked. Especially after what they did to us, said firmly. We show them the difference between justice and revenge. We show them that even in war, even in rage, humans don't become monsters. We stay human. He looked out at the ships, dark and silent, waiting like predators. 7 days. The Emperor thinks he's prepared. He has no idea what's coming. Dr. Shin approached with a tablet. Admiral, the calculations are complete. If we execute the plan perfectly, we can neutralize 80% of their military in the first strike. And the other 20%? Asked. Smile was cold. They'll be too busy running to fight back. Sir, they called us ghosts. It's time we haunt them properly. As the fleet prepared to depart, a message arrived from Earth. Authorization codes, final approval for Operation Mercy's End. The government had given them everything they asked for, every resource, every weapon. Humanity, it seemed, had found its spine. The ghost fleet moved out into the dark, invisible and inexorable. Somewhere ahead, the Empire celebrated its victories, confident in its power. They didn't know that mercy, once betrayed, could transform into something terrible. They were about to learn. The attack came on the 7th day, exactly as promised. Military command was tracking every approach vector, every known human ship. Their sensors swept space continuously. Their weapons were armed and ready. The Emperor had assembled the largest defensive fleet in history around the. Nothing could get through. Then their own weapons turned on them. Captain stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought Mercy's Price, watching screens showing chaos across space. The Ghost Fleet had done its work perfectly. For months they'd infiltrated systems, planting code, waiting. Now that code activated. Ships found their targeting computers locked on their own allies. Communications went dark or started broadcasting false orders. Navigation systems showed coordinates that didn't exist. Power cores went into emergency shutdown. In 60 seconds, the mighty military became a confused, fighting itself mess. All ships advance, ordered calmly. Remember military targets only. Verify every shot, no civilian casualties. The Ghost Fleet materialized from nowhere, their stealth systems dropping as they needed to fire. Commanders finally saw them and despaired. These weren't the simple human ships they destroyed a year ago. These were monsters, sleek, deadly, covered in weapons that shouldn't exist. The Mercy's Price led the charge, its main cannon firing pulses of concentrated energy that carved through shields like they weren't there, but didn't target crew sections. Every shot hit engines, weapons, power cores, disabling, not destroying, taking away their ability to fight, not their lives. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported. They want to negotiate. Tell them we'll talk after we have our people back, replied. Not before. On the surface of the, Colonel 1 led Ghost Squadron through the palace. They moved like shadows, their advanced armor making them nearly invisible. Guards fired wildly at nothing, their shots going wide as human soldiers slipped past. His team reached the prison level without firing a single shot. She used a device that simply made the locks forget they were locked. The doors opened. Inside, Ambassador and Commander looked up in shock. They were thinner, marked by a year of captivity, but alive. Behind them, dozens of other human prisoners stirred with hope. "We're Ghost Squadron," said, her voice processed through her helmet. "We're here to bring you home." His eyes filled with tears. "Earth, the colonies." "Still standing," assured her. "Hurt but not broken, and now it's payback time. Can you walk?" "We can run," said, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "Lead the way." As they escaped through the palace, alarms screaming around them, they passed the Emperor's throne room. The doors were open. Inside, Admiral stood facing Emperor Al. The Emperor was surrounded by guards, but none of them moved. They couldn't. Human technology had frozen their armor, turned them into statues. Only the Emperor remained free, and only because wanted him that way. "You," the Emperor snarled, recognizing the face from the recording. "You dare enter my palace." "Your palace is surrounded," said calmly. "Your fleet is disabled. Your military is in chaos. This is over. Surrender now and we can end this without more bloodshed." "Never, you are nothing. Insects pretending to be warriors." His jaw tightened. "We saved your commander's life. We offered you peace. You repaid us with betrayal and murder. Now face the consequences." "What will you do?" the Emperor mocked. "Kill me, destroy my world, show me this human rage you threatened." "No," said quietly. "We're not going to kill you. We're going to make sure you never hurt anyone again. Your empire is done. Your weapons are destroyed. Your fleets are scrap. And you," he stepped closer, "will face justice. Not human justice. Galactic justice. Every species you've conquered, enslaved, or murdered will have their say." The Emperor's confidence cracked. "You wouldn't dare. The collective has allies." "Had allies," corrected. "We've been contacting them, showing them what you did. Turns out nobody likes a backstabber. You're alone, Emperor. Your empire is crumbling and there's no one coming to save you." Outside the palace, civilians watched in confusion as human soldiers escorted prisoners to waiting ships. But the soldiers weren't looting, weren't shooting civilians, weren't burning the city. They were just leaving, taking their people and withdrawing. One child, no more than 8 in human years, approached a human soldier cautiously. The soldier, massive in black armor, knelt down to the child's level. "Are you going to kill us?" the child asked in broken standard. The soldier's helmet retracted, showing a woman's face, tired but gentle. "No, little one, we're not here for you. We're here for our family, that's all." The child's mother rushed over, pulling her child back, but the soldier just stood and walked away. The mother watched, confused. These were supposed to be the monsters her government warned about. They looked like warriors but acted like people. In orbit, the battle was winding down. Ships that tried to fight were disabled. Those that surrendered were left alone. Watched the tactical display with satisfaction. 0 civilian casualties, minimal military deaths. This was a surgical strike, not a massacre. "Admiral is clear of the palace," his tactical officer reported. "He has the Emperor in custody, all prisoners accounted for." "Good, begin Phase 2. Phase 2 was systematic. Every military installation was targeted. But again, precisely. Weapons were destroyed, ships dismantled, but the people inside were given time to evacuate. It was ruthlessly efficient. Humanity didn't want peace through fear. They wanted peace through strength. Show that they couldn't win, not by destroying them, but by making fighting impossible. On a transport ship heading back to human space, sat with the other freed prisoners. They were crying, laughing, holding each other. She watched through a viewport as space fell behind them. Sat down beside her. His face was harder than she remembered, aged by captivity. "We won," he said quietly. "Did we?" asked. 4 million people are still dead. The colonies are still in ruins. What did we actually win?" "Survival," replied. "And proof that humanity doesn't break. They tried to destroy us, Ambassador. They failed." "But at what cost?" Looked at her hands, thinking of all the violence. "Are we still the species that offers mercy, or did we become like them?" Before could answer, an alarm sounded. The ship shuddered. Through the viewport, they saw a lone cruiser approaching, weapons armed. It had broken through the blockade, refusing to surrender. The cruiser opened fire on the transport. The shields held, but barely. This was a civilian ship, not armed for combat. If they kept firing, they'd punch through. Then the Mercy's price appeared between them and the attacker. His voice came over the radio, broadcast to all ships. "Cruiser, stand down. This is your final warning." The cruiser's response was another volley, this time aimed at the Mercy's price. The shots splashed against the dreadnought's shields harmlessly. "Captain," his weapons officer said, "we can destroy them in one shot." stared at the ship. He thought about the 4 million dead. He thought about the year of war. He thought about every reason to end this ship and its crew permanently. No, he said finally. Disable their weapons and engines. Leave life support intact. They want to fight. Fine. They can float there and think about their choices until someone picks them up. The Mercy's Price fired precisely, surgically. The cruiser went dark, dead in space but intact. Its crew would live. On the transport, watched this exchange and felt something tight in her chest loosen. There's your answer, she said too. We haven't become like them. Even now, even after everything, we choose differently. But the moment of relief was shattered by a new alarm. Multiple ships were approaching from the outer system. Not military, these were civilian transports, thousands of them, fleeing in panic. And behind them, a massive warship. The Emperor's personal flagship, still commanded by loyalists. It was firing on the civilian ships, trying to prevent them from leaving. The message was clear. If the Empire was falling, it would take everyone with it. This is Colonel One to all human ships, came a broadcast. Those are civilians under attack. I don't care what flag they fly. Ghost Squadron, intercept and protect. The human fleet moved as one. Ships that minutes ago were fighting the military now positioned themselves between civilians and military. The flagship tried to push through, but the Mercy's Price blocked it completely. Stand down, ordered the flagship. Those are your own people. Traitors, came the response. They flee instead of fight. They deserve death. Then you'll have to go through us, said coldly. The flagship opened fire on the Mercy's Price. This time didn't hesitate. His ship returned fire with overwhelming force. The flagship's shields collapsed. Its weapons exploded. Its engines went critical. But before it could finish it, the flagship detonated its own core, choosing destruction over defeat. The explosion lit up space, but the civilian transports were already clear, protected by human ships. Thousands of lives saved by the species they'd tried to exterminate. Captain Minu walked through the palace. He'd come out of retirement for this, to see with his own eyes what his mercy had led to. Met him in the throne room, both brothers standing in silence. You were right to save them, said finally. Even knowing how it ended, you were right. Was I? Minu looked at the empty throne. 4 million dead because I showed mercy. No, shook his head firmly. 4 million dead because they chose cruelty. That's on them, not you. And now, because of what you taught us, we've won without becoming monsters. That's worth something. A sound made them turn. Stood in the doorway, disarmed and guarded but alive. He looked at Minu with something like shame in his alien eyes. Captain, he said quietly, I have no excuse. When I could have spoken, I remained silent. The life debt you gave me, I dishonored. Minu studied him for a long moment. Yes, you did. If you want revenge, I will not resist. Revenge? Minu's laugh was bitter. No, Commander, you'll live. You'll help rebuild. You'll spend the rest of your life making sure this never happens again. Death would be too easy. Nodded slowly. What will happen to my people? That depends on them, answered. The military is dismantled. The Emperor will face justice. The collective as it was is over. What comes next is up to the people themselves. As they left the palace, Minu saw among the freed prisoners the young helmsman he'd served with, now bearing the weight of captivity and war. They embraced briefly. We learned from you, Captain said. The mercy but also the strength. Minu couldn't speak. He just nodded, throat tight with emotion. That night humanity announced the terms. Complete disarmament, war crime trials, reparations for the colonies, and oversight that would rebuild but under galactic supervision. The Emperor from his cell refused everything. Never, he broadcast defiantly. The collective will rise again. You cannot keep us down forever. His answer came swiftly. A vote among the people themselves, broadcast across their world. 90% voted to accept the terms. The emperor's regime was over, repudiated by his own people. But the emperor had one final act of defiance. His loyalists launched a suicide attack on a human medical ship that was treating wounded soldiers, both human and. The attack succeeded. The ship was destroyed. Among the dead was Commander Park. When Minyu heard the news, he stood for a long moment in silence. Then he walked to the viewport of his ship and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a young helmsman who'd believed in bridges instead of walls was gone. Another life stolen by this senseless war. "This ends now," Minyu said quietly. "Brother, finish it." Admiral nodded grimly. The time for mercy had passed. The time for justice had come. The human fleet surrounded the like a steel noose. Every ship had weapons locked and charged. On every vessel, crews stood ready. This was it, the final moment. One word from Admiral and the civilization would end. On the bridge of the Mercy's Price waited for the order. His finger hovered over the firing control. Around him, his crew was silent. They'd all lost someone in this war. Friends, family, comrades. They had taken so much. One press of the button and it would be over. Admiral said quietly into his communicator, "We await your command." There was a long pause, so long that wondered if the transmission had failed. Then's voice came through, heavy with emotion and exhaustion. "Stand by, I'm making a broadcast." Every screen across human and space lit up with Admiral's face. He looked older than his years, worn down by war and loss. Behind him stood Captain Minyu, Ambassador Nam, and a dozen other human leaders. But also there, in chains, stood the Emperor. "People of Earth," began, his voice steady. "People of the colonies and people of the collective, we stand at a crossroads. Behind us is a year of war, of death, of pain on both sides. Ahead of us are two paths. I want to show you both." The screen changed, showing the human fleet. Weapons powered, ready to fire. "This is Path 1, total destruction. They attacked us, murdered 4 million of our people, enslaved our colonies. We have the power now to end them, to make sure they never threaten anyone again, to turn their world into ash and memory. And part of me," his voice cracked slightly, "part of me wants that. For everyone we've lost. For Commander Park, who died yesterday trying to save both human and wounded. For every child, every parent, every person that took from us." Silence hung heavy. Across Earth, in the colonies, in shelters and homes, people held their breath. But, continued, there's a second path. The screen changed again, showing civilians. Families huddled in shelters, children crying, ordinary people who'd never wanted war. These people didn't attack us. Their leaders did. Their military did. But them, they're just people trying to survive like us. He looked directly at the camera, at the billions watching. "The Empire made a choice. They took our mercy and called it weakness. They repaid compassion with cruelty. But we have a choice now. Do we become what they thought we were, vengeful, brutal, willing to kill millions for the sins of their leaders? Or do we show them what humanity really is?" Minyu stepped forward, his voice joining his brother's. "5 years ago, I saved lives because it was right. Not because I expected reward, but because leaving people to die was wrong. That choice led to this war, yes. But I wouldn't change it. Because the moment we stop being human, the moment we let cruelty define us, we've lost something that can never be recovered." Ambassador spoke next. Despite her year of captivity, her voice was strong. "I was tortured. I was humiliated. I watched friends die in prisons, but I refused to let that pain turn me into what they were. We offered peace and got war. Now we've won that war. What we do next will define humanity for generations." Nodded, then turned to face the Emperor. The ruler stood defiant even in chains, his face twisted with hate. "Emperor Al," said coldly, "you gambled that humans were weak. You lost. Your empire is ended. Your military is destroyed. But I'm going to give you something you never gave us. A choice." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Surrender completely. Face justice. Help your people transition to peace. Do this and your people live. Their world remains. They get a chance to rebuild." voice dropped to something dangerous. Refuse, and I will show you what human mercy looks like when it's exhausted. Not genocide, we're not monsters. But we will dismantle every city, every structure, every piece of technology on your world. We'll leave your people alive, but in the Stone Age. They'll spend 1,000 years rebuilding what you destroyed in your arrogance. You're bluffing, the Emperor spat. You don't have the stomach for it. Try me, said flatly. I'm a man who watched my brother's best friend die yesterday. I'm a man who's seen 4 million graves that shouldn't exist. I'm at the very edge of mercy, Emperor. Push me further and see what happens. For the first time, uncertainty crossed the Emperor's face. But Minyu interjected, there's a third option, one you didn't give us. He held up something small and glittering, the mercy token, carefully reconstructed from its broken fragments. This token represents a life debt, a promise that mercy matters. You broke it, mocked it, displayed it as a trophy, but we kept the pieces. We put it back together, because we believe in what it represents, even when others don't. He turned to the camera, addressing the people directly. Your Emperor chose war, you don't have to. We offer you the same thing we offered before, peace. Genuine peace. Help us bring your leaders to justice. Help us make sure this never happens again. Do that and we'll help you rebuild, not as conquerors but as, he paused, searching for the word, as neighbors who had a terrible misunderstanding. Lies, the Emperor shouted. They'll enslave you, they'll destroy everything. But stepped forward then, flanked by guards but speaking freely. No, my Emperor, they won't, because I've seen what they really are. He looked at the camera, at his own people. Captain saved my life when he had no reason to. His people showed us mercy and we repaid them with death. But even now, even after everything, they choose differently. They could end us. They won't. That's not weakness. That's a strength our empire never possessed. Across something unprecedented happened. People began coming out of their shelters, not to fight but to protest. They filled the streets, holding signs in their own language and in human standard. No more war. The Emperor's regime is over. We choose peace. The military, what remained of it, began standing down. Commanders contacted the human fleet not with threats but with offers to surrender. One by one, the pieces of the empire simply stopped fighting. The Emperor watched this on screens, his face contorting with rage and disbelief. Traitors, all of you, I am your Emperor. Not anymore, said quietly. Your own people have spoken. The vote we held earlier wasn't just for show. The collective as you led it is finished. What comes next is up to them. Then destroy them all, the Emperor screamed, losing all composure. If I can't rule, let it all burn. That, Minyu said sadly, is why you were never fit to lead. The Emperor lunged at Minyu, but guards held him back. As he was dragged away, still screaming threats, the two brothers stood together looking at the showing. Should we help them? Asked over the communicator. They're organizing food distribution, medical care. They're trying, but they don't have the infrastructure anymore. Looked at Minyu. The older brother smiled slightly. Yes, send aid teams, medical supplies, food, engineering support. Let them lead the effort, but help them. Sir, one officer protested, after what they did to us. After what their leaders did, Minyu corrected. The civilians down there are victims too. Different victims than us, but victims nonetheless. Over the next weeks, something remarkable happened. Human and worked together, carefully at first, with suspicion and pain on both sides. But slowly, bridges were built. Human doctors taught medical students. Human engineers helped technicians rebuild power grids. Human teachers helped children learn about a galaxy bigger than their empire's propaganda. The 12 fallen colonies were reclaimed and rebuilt. Each was renamed Stand, Mercy's Remembrance, Hope's Rest. Monuments were erected, listing every name of every person lost. The who'd enslaved the colonists were tried, some imprisoned, some put to work in rebuilding efforts under supervision. The Emperor faced a tribunal of not just humans, but representatives from dozens of species that had wronged over the years. His trial lasted months. In the end, he was found guilty of war crimes, genocide, and crimes against sapient life. His sentence, life imprisonment, working in the very colonies he'd destroyed, helping rebuild what he'd torn down, became an unlikely advocate for peace. He spent his days speaking to youth, teaching them about the old mercy token, about the choice his empire had made and its consequences. He carried the reconstructed token with him always, a reminder and a promise. One day, years after the war ended, Captain Minu visited one of the rebuilt colonies. He walked through streets lined with trees, past schools where human and children played together. It was awkward still, fraught with history, but it was happening. He found himself at a memorial, a simple stone wall with thousands of names carved into it. His fingers traced name, the young helmsman who'd believed in bridges. "Captain," a voice said behind him. He turned to see an elderly woman leaning on a cane. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" Minu asked, confused. "My granddaughter is in that school." She gestured to a building nearby. "Learning human history, human language, learning about mercy and second chances. If you'd done what my emperor deserved, what he'd have done to you, she wouldn't exist. None of this would exist." Minu didn't know what to say. The old woman smiled, her alien face crinkling in a way that was almost human. "The young ones, they're taught about the mercy token now, about how humans could have destroyed us but chose differently. My granddaughter asked me yesterday why the humans showed mercy twice, once in saving Commander and again in not destroying our world. Do you know what I told her?" "What?" Minu asked. "I told her that mercy isn't a single act. It's a choice made over and over again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You taught us that, the hard way, but thank you." She shuffled away, leaving Minu alone with the memorial. He thought about the war, about the death, about and 4 million others. The pain would never fully heal, but maybe it meant something. Doctor found him there as the sun set. She'd been working in a hospital, training doctors in human medicine and learning medicine in return. "Ready to go, Captain?" she asked gently. "I'm not a captain anymore," he said with a slight smile. "Just Minu now." "You'll always be the captain to some of us," she replied. "The man who showed mercy when no one expected it. The man who proved humanity's strength isn't in our weapons." As they walked back to their transport, they passed a plaza where a large statue stood. It depicted two figures, one human, one holding up a glowing crystal between them. The mercy token made monumental. At its base, an inscription in both languages. Here mercy was broken and remade. Here war ended and peace began. Here two species learned that strength without compassion is tyranny, but compassion without strength is vulnerability. True power is having the ability to destroy and choosing to build instead. Across the galaxy, in classrooms and colleges, the story was taught, not as a simple tale of good versus evil, but as something more complex. A lesson about choices, about consequences, about the thin line between justice and revenge. Young students, human, and dozens of other species, learned the saying that had emerged from that terrible war. Never mistake human kindness for human weakness. They will save you from the stars themselves, but betray that kindness, and they will move the stars themselves to ensure you never harm another. Humans became known not for their mercy alone, nor for their vengeance, but for both. For the careful balance between compassion and strength, between forgiveness and justice. They became the species that would extend a hand in friendship, but if that hand was bitten, would return with an army, and then, after victory, extend the hand again. Years turned to decades. The collective became the Commonwealth, a democracy that worked alongside humanity in galactic affairs. The scars remained, they always would, but they were healing. And in museums across both human and space, carefully preserved behind glass, sat a small crystal token. Broken once, reconstructed, a symbol of something both fragile and unbreakable. The mercy token. A reminder that humans never forget mercy, and that their revenge, when necessary, can indeed destroy worlds, but their choice to show mercy afterward can rebuild them. In the end, that was the real human superpower. Not their technology, not their weapons, not even their capacity for violence. It was their stubborn, persistent, sometimes foolish insistence on being better than their worst instincts, on choosing, over and over again, to be human, even when it cost them everything. Especially then,